Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Today we have a dive watch shootout in which cost is most definitely an object. It's Rolex versus Sinn versus starts now. All right, let's take a look at the watch that is the more familiar of the two. Usually I start with the unfamiliar watch, but because the Rolex is the overdog in the match and recently redesigned for 2020, we will reacquaint ourselves with the most recognizable face in all of horology. Now, the original sub came out in 1953, and along with that year's Blancpain 50 Fathoms, became the prototype of the modern dive watch. For 2020, there were some changes internally with a new 70-hour movement. We get a new green sub. This is the 126610LV, the LV, a running series of green inflected submariners since 2003, which was the anniversary year of the sub. And so this one features a 41 millimeter case, which is a first for a submariner. That's the diameter, and then the thickness is 12.5. It's 48.3 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and 51.2 millimeters from end link to end link, with a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. And that 21 millimeter spacing with a broader end link and thinner lugs is part of the aesthetic refinement of this generation of sub. Now, although it is larger by a millimeter, I've found that, for example, the thickness and the lug-to-lug are identical. No other dimension is more than 7/10 of a millimeter larger than the old sub. So if you can wear the old sub, you can wear the new sub. Now, it fits relatively close to the wrist. Rolex dive watches are de rigueur in offices around the world, so you're going to find that it is quite easy to wear with a suit as well as with formal attire. It is welcome in polite company. I would say a 15 centimeter circumference wrist or larger can wear this. Again, my wrist is 16. I'm not quite at the limits there, and it really does have a low slung profile vis-a-vis a cuff. Here's your over-the-top shot. Now let's take a look at the bracelet. Of course, Rolex for a long time building conforming end links so that the bracelet mates neatly with the case. The case is polished on its flanks. The bracelet is polished on its flanks, satin across the lug hoods as well as the tops of the links. When you take a look at the links, you can see the removable links are fixed by flathead screws. We have an intermediate sized link in there for fine-tuning the size. And then we have Rolex's Glide Lock. This is 20 millimeters of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, so you can use it to make small adjustments for fit, but then you can also pull it out all the way for use over a diving suit. The clasp is of very high quality. It's thick gauge steel. It's alternately polished and satinated. There is a spring-loaded lift lock system. That's the first one to latch. There's a beak and a hook. You can see them latch right there. That's the first lock. That's the second lock. There's a little kerf underneath the Rolex cornets. You can dig your finger in and unlatch it. 904L steel, a small distinction, but Rolex does emphasize that this watch is particularly resistant to corrosion in the presence of sweat and sea salt, as well as certain industrial acids. The bezel, super smooth, but with a well-pronounced 120 click action. You do still feel the detent. It just doesn't offer a lot of resistance, but still very precise. You can locate the sapphire-capped bezel pearl right against the minute hand, and now you've got an impromptu 0 to 60-minute count-up timer. Ceramic bezel insert, platinum deposits to create the silvered numerals and indices. We've got a dial that is black lacquer with white gold hands and white gold applique hour indices. For 2020, the sub gains that little crown between Swiss and made. So the dial is very upscale. We'll do a quick loom shot here so you can see. Easy to recognize. All three hands loomed. Every dive watch should do that. Plus a large, easily recognized bezel pearl. Inside, we've got caliber, a 3235, new generation movement for this generation of the sub, protected down to 300 meters. A 70-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer. Rolex goes above and beyond, rating this watch to -2 + 2 seconds per 24 hours. That is the superlative chronometer standard. And so the watch is certified as a chronometer. I should say the movement is certified as a chronometer, but the watch itself is fully assembled, tested in 6 positions, and then Rolex attests it'll run no worse than -2 + 2 seconds as it leaves the factory. Other features worth noting: it is highly anti-magnetic, highly shock resistant, and because it uses the same movement as a million other Rolex watches, it is serviceable at any Rolex regional service center around the world. And that matters when you're talking about a global brand like Rolex versus something like a smaller independent brand like Sinn. Now, let's take a quick look at the Sinn. Of course, Sinn out of Frankfurt, Sinn Specialuren. They make all sorts of sporting themed watches, a handful of dress watches, and for the most part, they're known as a pilot's watch specialist. Helmut Sinn, the founder, was a pilot himself. But this watch right here is diving themed. It's part of the Einsatzzeitmesser, or mission timer series, so EZM, and it retains the famed angular beveled lugs from the 1997 EZM-1, which was built as a timing instrument for the German Federal Customs Enforcement Unit. So this watch, although not an EZM-1 or 1.1, bears the obvious design genetics of Sinn's most famous model. It's stainless steel, media blasted, 41 millimeters in diameter, 12.5 millimeters thick. It's 48 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and end link to end link. It's 50.7 millimeters across the wrist with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. These watches are very, very, very similar in size and fit. Now I'm going to throw the watch on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters again, and you can see that there's really not much to tell between the two of them. The Sinn does have many factory strap options that you can fit that look natural on the watch, and of course, being a 20 millimeter lug spacing, you're going to have a universe of options in that strap size. The lugs have a lot of character, but they're also downwardly angled, which mitigates against fit issues, and the watch is just as thin as the sub, so it's going to slide under cuffs just as easily. It does feel robust. For a watch that retails for $2,290, it doesn't feel like it costs less than a quarter of the price of the Rolex. It feels like it's very comparable. There is some play in the bracelet here that's not present in the Rolex Oyster, but for the most part, it is quite redoubtable. A feature that I like to see is that removable links are fixed with hex head screws, because you can apply more torque to a hex head screw and make it more secure without stripping it out, and that's why Sinn uses that kind of a screw head. We also have an all-or-nothing fold-out dive extension, as well as 3 divots, or pairs of divots, I should say, inside the single-fold deployant clasp, so you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point if you want to fine-tune the fit. And then, of course, we have this stainless steel single-fold with a clamshell lock, Sinn branded. Everything here is media blasted, which is worth noting, because if you scratch a media blasted watch and send it back for refinishing, they're going to media blast it again, not necessarily remove metal. And of course, there's always going to be scratches on a watch, so it's nice to know that a refinish can be done non-reductively. We have those lovely EZM 1 and 1.1 style lugs, and then we have a set of narrow crown guards for the Sinn branded crown. It is a screw down crown. It is a lefty crown, and the watch is 500 meters water resistant, which is a solid advantage over the sub. It also has a aluminum insert in its bezel, which, while not as scratch resistant as the Rolex's ceramic, is shatter resistant. Let's do a quick turn in here. If you like a chunky dive bezel, look no further. This is as loud and raucous as the bezels on Doxa subs and Panerai submersibles. It is a 60 click, so it doesn't quite have the precision with which the Rolex bezel can be set, but it can be set just fine against the minute reference, and it will put on a show. It feels and sounds spectacular in motion. We'll do a quick loom shot here. All 3 hands loomed, and a much bigger bezel pearl than the Rolex. Now, the dial clearly is built to a price, but it's also built for function, which means that you have a matte dial. Everything unnecessary is red, which means the date disc, the Einsatzzeitmesser notation, the AR, more on that in a moment. Everything that's necessary is in white. So we have white hands, we have white numerals, we have white indices, very easy to read. It is a mission timer. On the reverse side, like the Rolex, we have a screwed-on case back, though you can see this one advertises a couple of proprietary Sinn technologies. There's AR, which is a system by which the watch is nitrogen filled, and then a copper sulfate capsule that is inserted and, yes, refreshable during service. It goes into the case, and it changes from white, as you see here, to dark blue over time. Any moisture that intrudes into the case gets pulled out by the copper sulfate capsule, which can be refreshed again, so the watch is able to actively dehumidify itself. Now, I know AR is argon, the watch is nitrogen filled. At a point, Sinn changed the gas used. Make no mistake, they serve the same purpose. Also on the reverse side, you'll note that this watch attests to spectacular anti-magnetic resilience. 80,000 ampere per meter, roughly equivalent to mil Gauss or 1,000 Gauss. and 500 meters water resistant. Another feature you can't see is that Sinn uses special lubricants in this model, which are resistant to temperatures as low as minus 45 degrees Celsius and as high as 80 degrees Celsius. So basically unsurvivable temperatures for you, but not for the watch. The movement is simple. It's an SW200-1. It is Solida's version of an ETA 28242. Sinn gets the top grade and then takes that top graded SW200 and adjusts it in-house. It's a bidirectional winder with a 38 to 40 hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate, a 26 pivot joules. It has quick set date as well as stop seconds. They're very tough and reliable tractor movements that can be regulated to keep outstanding time. So that's what lies within. So let's talk about our advantages. We'll start with the Rolex. The Rolex, always the one to buy new. If you can afford to wait and then pay the price, you'll buy this watch for $10,800 at your Rolex dealer, wear it for a year or two, you'll sell it, you'll still make money. Pre-owned right now for these, $17,000 to $18,000, so if you pay $10,800 to buy it, and you can get out at $17,000 to $18,000, you did quite well. Also, although the Einsatzzeitmesser EZM has 1 more year of warranty versus a standard Sinn, so 3 versus 2, Rolex offers a 5-year warranty, and Rolex is also noted in factory literature that the service interval is 10 years. Sinn will not make that attestation, so it's nice to know you buy your Rolex, you're set for a long time. Bezel quality, a couple of things. First, the action, super refined. Second, 120 clicks versus 60. Third, ceramic insert with platinum infill for all the characters. And I would even go so far as to say fourth, here we have a ceramic capped bezel pearl, so the lume can't be scratched off. So a better bezel. What else is better? Well, the clasp. Here we have a double locking clasp that is more thoroughly finished with its combination of satin and polish. We also have the glide lock system, which is superior to the elements of adjustability built into the Sinn bracelet. So the clasp is better on several levels, from the aesthetic to the purely functional. I would also mention that we have a lot of technical advantages inside this watch's movement. Here we have a 38-hour power reserve. Here we have 70. Here we have a movement with a single-sided balance cock. Here we have a dual-sided balance bridge, and the balance is free sprung. And we have an accuracy guarantee from the factory of +2, -2, or better. Sinn makes no attestation, though they note that they adjust the watch as well as possible. And although this watch is rated to 80,000 ampere per meter, I can assure you this watch, though unadvertised, is far, far more than that. With its Parachrom Blue Niobium Zirconium hairspring and anti-magnetic balance staff, and escapement. The escapement being made of nickel phosphorus. This watch is more anti-magnetic and more shock resistant than what you have here. I should also mention that this is a watch for which dial quality is a standout. When you look closely, you can see how richly lacquered that dial is. It's glossy, gleaming. It looks like bottomless wet paint. And then we have applied white gold indices and hands to match, whereas the Sinn's dial is flat, featureless, and purely printed. What else is important? Well, I would argue that realistically, you've got options here. You have different metals, different colors. You have different bezel options. You have the option of a no date or a date. Many different choices with the Rolex, including gem set Submariners that you don't get with the EZM3 from the factory. I would also argue forever design. This watch is 70 years young this year, and although it does evolve, it is still visibly the same watch that came out in '53, and I have no doubt that for the Submariner Centennial in 2053, this watch will still be recognizable as a sub. So let's talk about the Sinn and what the Sinn does better. First, 500 meters versus 300 meters. 500 is better, right? Might be bragging rights, but it's real. Also, for a lot of folks, the ambidextrous lefty crown is going to be appealing. Now, I will share a secret with you. Both of these watches can be worn lefty or righty, but this is just a little bit more unique, and sometimes being different has its own kind of quality and value in the watch hobby. Plus, if you do grip the bottom of a firearm, imagine you're holding it like this. The idea here was that since this was based on a design for the German Federal Customs Enforcement units, this is basically like a mirror of the EZM1. You would be able to, as a righty, hold your rifle or your flashlight with 2 hands, just like this, and the crown wouldn't dig your wrist. You see how it's on the other side? That was the idea there. So there's even a cool story behind the lefty crown on this watch. Also, Lower price of entry by far. This watch is $2,290 new, pre-owned. It's going to be $2,000 to $2,500 depending on condition, warranty remaining, and boxes and papers. But still, $2,000 and change for a watch with this much capability is hugely appealing. The watch at retail, this watch and this watch, this is 4.7 times more than this watch. As they appear on the aftermarket in general, this watch is going to be just short of 8 times the price of this watch. And yes, price matters. Also, there's some cool proprietary tech between the lubricants, the AR system, the anti-magnetic qualities of the watch, the hex head removable links. There's just a lot to love with this watch, right down to the distinctively Sinn design. So while it doesn't have all the tech and spec of the Rolex, there are quite a few features that set it apart from other Sellita-powered dive watches. Also important, you get a tool that comes with the watch that allows you to make changes if you want to fit it to a strap. You will find lots of factory strap options here, whereas Rolex offers no factory strap options on the sub. Also important, zero pretense. This is the definition of a tool watch, and while any watch costing thousands of dollars is still a luxury article, nevertheless, this is less pretentious and less likely to draw unwanted attention than this, and that is important to some buyers. I would also say it has a lume advantage to go with its depth advantage. So let's take a quick look at these two watches. I'm going to turn out the lights, get a little bit closer. You can tell me which one you think is better loomed, but I do think by a narrow margin the Sinn takes it. Also, what I've noticed is that the longer you leave the lights off, the bigger the Sinn's advantage, and I just think it ekes out a small margin of advantage over the sub that widens as they dim with time. So that's my judgment. You can reach your own conclusion. My conclusion is that the Sinn is just too good a buy to ignore. For a lot of folks, cost is a very real object. This is still a luxury timepiece. There are going to be friends of yours who can't fathom paying $2,000 for a watch. This is a higher luxury choice. So this is high luxury, this is luxury. Both of them are suitable for watch hobbyists. Both of them are heirloom quality. This one just costs so much less money, and with the fit being almost equivalent from one to the other, I can't imagine spending nearly 11 grand to buy this new if I'm buying it to own it, not buying it to sell it. This watch will save more money for my other hobbies, which include other watches as well as cars and bikes. So this allows you to live more. It's a watch designed for an active lifestyle, and that lifestyle will have more options for the money you save. That said, if you want the cost no object superior timepiece, the Rolex is better in every single way. Obviously, it's going to draw some unwanted attention and it'll require a weight and maybe a bigger outlay, but the Rolex is worth what Rolex charges for it. And yes, it is worth the weight. So this is the qualified winner, and this is the unqualified winner. You guys let me know in the comments below which one you think is the champ.